In the award-winning film Saving Private Ryan, when asked about the tremor in his hand, Captain Miller, played by Tom Hanks, tells his sergeant that it began after he and his men were moved down to Portsmouth just prior to embarkation. But anybody with a basic knowledge of Operation Overlord and the D-Day landings in Normandy in 1944 knows that the US Army was based to the far west of Portsmouth and to the west of the civilian port of Southampton. Here lies the rub, because it was Southampton that was the principal embarkation port for Allied forces, and the US Army in particular. US forces did not leave from Portsmouth. According to Major General Sir Nigel Homes, without Southampton we could not have done D-Day. Yet the remark made by Tom Hanks in the film is only one of the misconceptions repeated in the narrative about D-Day landings in 1944. Most would agree that fundamental to the success of D-Day was the element of surprise. As far as Portsmouth was concerned, the Royal Navy transferred the capital ships to Scapa Flow in the Orkneys, out of the way of the Luftwaffe. Planners were also aware that any large-scale build-up around Portsmouth would telegraph the Allies' intentions to the enemy and thereby sacrifice the key element of surprise. It is perverse that, in contrast, because Southampton, like many other UK cities, suffered as a result of the 1940 Blitz, it was dismissed as a possible base for the invasion armada, because Allied commanders feared another such attack. Much is made of Operation Fortitude to deceive the enemy into thinking the landings would occur at the Pas de Calais. Double agents, fake armies, were all schemes predicated on the German High Command assumption that Southampton was finished in 1940, therefore could not provide the facilities necessary for Operation Overlord. However, this did not deter the Americans, who realised Southampton was the only port big enough to accommodate the D-Day Armada. Even today, passengers on the cruise liners docking at Southampton are oblivious to the fact they are embarking and disembarking at the same berths used for Operation Overlord in 1944. School children in the UK are taught that the port is successful because of the unique double high tide, which means that passengers can be landed at any time of the tide. The strategic implication in wartime is that any vessel ranging from the smallest landing craft to the largest troop ship could be loaded 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This unique characteristic of the port was all important because Operation Overlord was to become a race of life and death to see who could build up forces at the beachhead the fastest. Would it be the Allies' landing craft or the Axis panzers? This leads to another popular misconception about Operation Overlord, that the headquarters was at Southwark House, north of Portsdown Hill, and some distance from the coastline. Clarifying the significance of this point in his report, Admiral Ramsay says, "From the outset of detailed planning, it was clear that success would be largely dependent upon the ability to exercise close and continuous control of the thousands of ships and craft taking part. This overall control would have to embrace control of loading of all type of shipping and craft, control of convoy sailing, control of tugs, and control of ship repairs. Without it, time would inevitably be lost, and best use could not be made of the great resources given to the operation to establish our forces ashore and then to reinforce them as quickly as possible. As other services and authorities besides the navies were intimately concerned with many of the problems connected with the rapid reinforcement of the expeditionary force, it was found necessary during planning to set up new organisations to control various aspects of the operation during the vital first few weeks, in which the tempo of the initial assaults had to be maintained at the highest pitch. Turo, Bucco, Go Rep and Co-Tug accordingly came into being and were instrumental in the success achieved. The titular and strategic headquarters was at Southwark House, where the map room and museum are now located. In reality, because the main part of the D-Day Armada sailed from Southampton, it was necessary to have operational headquarters close at hand. Because of the ad hoc nature of the setup of these control organisations instrumental to the success of Operation Overlord, described in Admiral Ramsey's report, many historians assume that BUCO, or the US Build-Up and Control Organisation, during Operation Overlord was located in Portsmouth. But this is not so. Another misconception perpetuated locally in Southampton is that the headquarters for the US Army during the period was in Nissen huts located in Hoglands Park. There are a number of photographs of US soldiers on duty outside the entrance of the 14th Major Port, as it was described. Only one photo has come to light of the actual headquarters on D-Day and during Operation Overlord. This was in a wing of the town hall called the Civic Centre, and in the archives there is correspondence between the US Army commander and the mayor seeking permission to use the building. This was the location of BUCO described in Admiral Ramsey's report. From the Civic Centre you can still see the berths from where the Armada sailed. Leading up to D-Day, this office was responsible for finding billets for the GIs arriving from the US. This was not a simple task. Sometimes units did not arrive at all. It was up to US personnel working in this office to organise transportation to transit camps along the south coast and their movement to their landing craft or troop ships. Once troops were securely landed in Normandy, the work of BUCO did not stop there. The Southampton end of the operation became known as Big BUCO, and the set-up on the beaches known as Little BUCO, from where operational needs were relayed home until supreme commanders could take the field. A second front was necessary in Europe to take the pressure off the Soviet army, but this was impossible before the US entered the war in December 1941.
This tablet was presented to the Southern Railway by the 14th Major Port United States Army in proud and glorious memory of the men and women of the forces of the United Nations who sailed from this port during the war against aggression to secure the freedom of mankind. Now Southampton is returning to normal activity. She might take a well-earned rest, but that would not be in the dock's tradition. Ships, once familiar at her quays, are now carrying passengers and merchandise again. Southampton is still Britain's premier passenger port, prepared to receive any ship and every ship.